On lap 66 of the 2019 Brazilian Grand Prix, Ferrari drivers Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc crashed into each other in the main straight heading into turn 4, and both drivers were taken out of the race. Who knew that such a tiny amount of contact could produce such a big incident with such massive consequences? This was the first time that Ferrari hadn't scored points since the 2017 Singapore Grand Prix. And as for the incident, I think that Leclerc could have done a bit more to certainly avoid it, but ultimately it was Sebastian Vettel who was at fault, if you have to put blame on anyone, because he was the one who veered to the left in the first place. So that crash was just one individual incident by itself, but in this video I'm going to look at the bigger picture of things, and not only at the incident, not only this as another big mistake by Sebastian Vettel, but I'm going to look at the Ferrari driver lineup itself and question, can Ferrari actually win titles with Vettel and Leclerc as their drivers? So yeah guys, this is going to be a really good video. Stick around to the end and be sure to subscribe to this channel, Kids Love F1, because there is going to be more great content coming your way very soon. This incident between Vettel and Leclerc, I mean, it was always going to happen. It was inevitable. When you have two drivers with a similar skill level who are really good and are unwilling to concede to each other, basically two alpha drivers, you're going to eventually have issues like this. We've seen it time and time again in history. Senna and Prost, Hamilton and Rosberg, most recently Verstappen and Ricciardo. When you have two alpha drivers, you are going to have problems like this. You have Sebastian Vettel, who's the older, four-time world champion, who really wants to prove that he's still good enough to be number one at Ferrari, still good enough to win championships, world titles. Then you have Charles Leclerc, the young up-and-coming driver, who again has a lot to prove, and he wants to make the case for that number one seat at Ferrari, be the go-to guy at Ferrari. So basically, two drivers with their own separate interests, they want to clash heads, and whenever they're fighting on track, neither of them is going to want to yield to each other, and it's going to be hard to make agreements for drivers for them to concede, like we've seen in Russia 2019. And this season has just been more of a case of really Ferrari beating themselves rather than Mercedes just being clearly better. I mean, the amount of points that Ferrari have lost due to like driver error, like crashes like we saw in Brazil, and strategy mistakes is just mind-blowing. How many points Ferrari are losing because of themselves, not even because of their rivals. And like I said, having two alpha drivers who are really evenly matched often does not work, and maybe the only time when you can have it is when you have a car that is head and shoulders above the rest of the field, and that is clearly something that Ferrari do not have, and I don't think they will be able to produce that in future years. So the thing is, what can Matteo Binotto and Ferrari do to make this driver pairing work, or do they need to change one or both drivers if they want to win titles? So as a Vettel fan, I really hate to say this, but I think that the slightly bigger problem in this driver pairing is Sebastian Vettel. I really don't think that over an entire season he can beat Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen and win Ferrari a title. Don't get me wrong, there have been stretches where he has been driving brilliantly like we would expect from a four-time world champion, like the start of 2017 or the start of 2018. He was driving brilliantly in those periods, but when the pressure comes, like everyone says, he always makes those crucial mistakes, and that is what loses him the championship. It was not only Vettel. I mean, Ferrari have done their part in also screwing it up all the time, but a lot of the time it is because of the Vettel mistakes that Ferrari lost the championships, especially in 2018. But I am not saying for 1 second that Sebastian Vettel is a bad driver. There is no doubt that he is one of the greatest drivers of all time, probably top 20 in my opinion. But the problem is Lewis Hamilton is the greatest driver of all time. And to beat Lewis Hamilton and the mighty Mercedes, I mean, there has to be no room for error. I mean, Ferrari and Vettel, they'd have to make zero mistakes. Ferrari would have to be exactly on the same page, and you need a second driver that will not take points off of the first driver and comply and jump out of the way for any sort of situation. And that is something that Charles Leclerc will not do. So when you have Vettel, a driver that isn't maybe even good enough to win a title on his own, and then Leclerc, who's not going to be willing to step aside and play second fiddle, then you have a big problem. Charles Leclerc is Ferrari's future. I mean, he is only in his second season, but has already made such a name for himself, beating Sebastian Vettel, the four-time world champion with 53 wins in the championship. Again, only in his second season with such little experiences. Yes, Vettel has had quite a lot of bad luck, but overall, across all performances in this season, I think that Leclerc has matched, if not been maybe slightly better than Sebastian Vettel, certainly in qualifying. I mean, Leclerc has absolutely demolished Vettel in qualifying, especially in the second half of the season. So if Leclerc is pretty much matching Vettel now, and he still has so much room for improvement, then I think that he is a bit more deserving as of now of that number one seat at Ferrari. If you were to keep the same drivers, then Leclerc would be the number one driver, but then Sebastian Vettel being the number two driver, that does not at all work. I mean, I said that Sebastian Vettel is not good enough to beat Lewis Hamilton, but I mean, do you know how good you have to be to beat Lewis Hamilton over a season in pretty much a straight fight? That is maybe almost impossible to do. But then Sebastian Vettel, like I said, he cannot be a number two driver because A, he is too quick, and B, he has too much to prove himself, and C, he is just not going to comply when asked, as we saw in the 2019 Russian Grand Prix. So, in my opinion at least, the best option for Ferrari to going forward, as harsh as it may be, would be to replace Sebastian Vettel at the end of the 2020 season when his contract expires. Ideally, I would replace him with the type of driver that would be ideal for a number two driver role. A driver that is on occasion very quick and can challenge for wins, but overall isn't consistently good enough to challenge for a championship and give the number one driver a lot of trouble. And maybe drivers like this are like a Nico Hülkenberg, Valtteri Bottas, who's seeing at Mercedes, Alex Albon, or perhaps Daniel Ricciardo, who is currently at Renault. At the end of 2020, maybe if his Renault move isn't working out, I would offer Ricciardo a contract for the 2021 season, because Ricciardo, he is a really quick driver, but I just don't think he is at the level of Lewis Hamilton, Verstappen, or maybe Charles Leclerc if he can keep improving. So I think that Ricciardo would definitely be a really good option for Ferrari in the 2021 season and going forward. This would be quite a controversial and harsh move, and you may not agree with me on this. Personally, half of myself as a Vettel fan doesn't agree with doing this, but I mean, it just, whether you agree with me or not, whether I'm right or wrong, it just highlights how much of an awkward situation Ferrari are in with their drivers, because sooner or later Charles Leclerc was going to be promoted to a top team. He's too much of a talent to lose. But then you have Sebastian Vettel, who he's really good, but maybe not enough to win the title. So Ferrari are really in an awkward situation. And until I think Vettel leaves, I think Ferrari are going to have this issue. And that is why when Vettel's contract are up, I think Ferrari need to show him the door, make him leave, and sign a new driver that isn't at Leclerc's level, but he is there to make sure that they can wrap up the constructors if they do have the chance. But next season in 2020, Ferrari are obviously going to have an unchanged lineup. So how does Binotto manage this quite, I don't know what word to say, explosive driver lineup? Well, I think that Binotto surely has given them quite a hard time on causing this incident, but the thing is, there's only one race left in the season, and by next season, a lot of this stuff is going to be forgotten by both of the drivers. But if an incident like this does happen again, I think that Binotto should certainly implement some sort of rule like no fighting on track, because if it does happen again, there will be quite big consequences, and if Ferrari are challenging for the championship, then it could be the difference between winning and losing. So that is just my opinion on this whole thing, but let's see what you guys had to say about the incident. So first, the F1 debate show. Totally Vettel's fault, but this situation is being blown completely out of proportion. It was minimal contact that leads to a big accident somehow. If this happened in the midfield, then we wouldn't be talking about it today. But I'd like to be a fly on the wall in Maranello. So yeah, the incident, itself, I don't think it really means that much, but I just looked at this video. This video is just a big picture talking about the driver lineup itself and if they are actually good enough to win a title. Next, F1 Fanatics Mike. Ferrari have the difficult situation that they have the two top drivers in a team and no clear number one. The only time teams in F1 history have been successful with that is when the team have a far superior car. Ferrari do not. And yes, that is true. So in the past, sometimes a team with two alpha drivers, usually the best two drivers on the grid, it has worked when the team has way better cars than the opposition. For example, McLaren in the late 80s, and also recently Mercedes in the early turbo hybrid era. And finally, we have Vyandra S. Monisyev. I don't know if I did not pronounce that right. But yeah, he does watch my videos and comments on them quite a lot. So thank you very much for that. But this is what he had to say. It's pretty much a situation where if you have two number one drivers with huge egos and both wants their bosses to listen to them rather than the other, it eventually leads to a rift and of course collisions on track. If I'm Binotto right now, I would give them consequences for their actions, tell them to race more carefully, or else one of them is out the door. And one more thing, it's becoming clear that now in order to win championships, you need a 1-2 driver system. One is, of course, the one that will win them championships, and while the other is unproblematic, a capable 300-point scorer driver, and will clean up if the number one driver has a bad day. And that one was quite a long response, but basically he's saying that if he's in support basically of a team having a clear number one and number two driver, and if Vettel and Leclerc cause an incident like this again, then one of them is out the door. So that's what he said, but he did not specify if he would change the driver lineup or what changes he would make if he would replace one of them. But yeah, thanks to him, the F1 Debate Show, and F1 Fanatics for replying to my tweet, leaving their thoughts, much appreciated. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. So I really hope you enjoyed watching it. That was my opinion on the whole Ferrari situation. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. I'm really excited to hear all of your opinions. Once again, thanks to everyone who left their thoughts replying to my tweet on Twitter. And yeah, that's this video. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe to my channel, Kids Love F1. There's going to be some great content coming out. Next week, I will be going to the final race of the 2019 F1 season of the decade, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I will be going to that race. I am super excited, and yes, I will be doing a vlog and hopefully releasing it in a few weeks' time, obviously, after I've went there. But yeah. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe and look out for some more great videos coming out very, very soon. As always, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Bye.